I'm joined here today by Sally Yates, who has, for many of us, become a symbol of principled leadership, of upholding the Constitution. And you've become that symbol in a deeply personal way to me and to many people in the Wellesley community. Can you share with us how you advise young women to consider a career in public service at a time when many of them feel discouraged and somewhat daunted by the current climate?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for your incredibly kind words. I will confess to you, though, I feel like I just did my job. And while it's awfully kind and nice to hear from you and from others, sentiments like that, I think what you would find is that there are a whole lot of people all across government who have a similar commitment that I had when I was serving in the Department of Justice. And they are those career employees in agencies from Department of Justice to state to, again, all across government that are really committed to doing things the right way. And that is the question that I hear most as I travel around the country and been speaking at lots of colleges and universities. And it seems like I can sort of count on one hand how long it's going to be until the question comes, I had really planned on going into public service, but I just don't know if I can do it in this environment. And it might surprise folks to know that I tell them to go, and for a couple of reasons. First, the vast majority of work doesn't really change from one administration to the next. Sort of the bread and butter work that's done doesn't change with policy changes. But secondly, the draw of public service for bright, dedicated, inspired young people is absolutely essential for our government and for our entire country. And if we lose that, if we lose young people going into public service, whether it's government or otherwise, because they're discouraged, then that's going to have an impact for many, many years to come. I actually happen to think that everybody has an obligation to do some kind of public service. It doesn't have to be working for the government, but some type of public service sometime in their life.
Today, Professor Larry Rosenwald talked about your act as an act of civil obedience, not as an act of dissent, but as an act of doing your job. Can you tell us how we can feel similarly effective and powerful in our own daily lives? Because what I heard from the students today was a combination of a yearning and an urgency to do that with discouragement and a feeling of complete disempowerment.
Yeah, and I hear that from other students and other folks too as I'm talking. And certainly there's a lot of angst out there now, and some people are discouraged, but I'll tell you what else I've seen that I think is markedly different, and that is a level of engagement from people in the political process like I've never seen before. You have people plugged into the news and what's going on. You have people writing their congressmen and senators, people going to marches, people joining advocacy groups, people going door to door. For example, in some of the elections we saw in Alabama and in Virginia, what happened there. So while I get and certainly appreciate that some people are discouraged and worried, on the other hand, I'm seeing a renewed vigor in the participatory nature of our democracy, and that can't be anything but good.
Earlier, you spoke when asked about the special place and the special challenges for young women. Here at Wellesley College, we're mindful that the work isn't done yet in order to provide access to women. What advice would you have for young women against the backdrop of special sensitivity around gender now, and given that the work is not finished?
Well, you're right, it's not, but I really do think that we're at a critical point right now. Whether it started in the Me Too movement or actually even before that with the Women's March. Yes. I was in Washington at the time and obviously was not participating in the Women's March. I was acting Attorney General then, but I was actually in a grocery store late that afternoon when the march was over and women were young women were just pouring into the store because it was so cold outside and the metro was too crowded. And I remember just sort of stepping back to watch for a little while and to watch these young women with their hats and their signs and who were totally comfortable in their own skin, totally comfortable in who they were and what they believed in and in their right and their obligation to express it. That's different than it was even when I was that age. You know, we've come a long way since then, and they weren't feeling the least bit sheepish about whether they might be perceived as being too assertive or aggressive or abrasive as a woman. They were just out there saying what they believed. And that is such a powerful thing. And in this moment that we have where young women, and some of us older women alike, are feeling this moment where, as I said earlier, we don't just find our voices, but we use them, and we use them powerfully. And I think that this is a real turning point where there's still more work to be done, but I think that we're on a different trajectory.
I do have one question about you as a mother.
Uh-huh.
How has being a mother influenced your practice as a lawyer and your work in particular in the Justice Department?
You know, I wonder if it's as being a mother or maybe it's just being a parent. You know, I would have a hard time distinguishing between whether or not a father would have these same feelings. But I know, you know, my children are grown now. I have a hard time sort of saying that, 26 and 23. But, you know, all the time that I was practicing, that I was a prosecutor, part of what I would think about would be the world that we're leaving for our children and for their children. And I look at that from a public safety standpoint, the world that we were leaving for them, but I also looked at it from the standpoint of trust and confidence, and is the criminal justice system, you know, an example of where the state, the government has the most extreme sense of power over the individual there, you know, the power to be able to deprive someone of their liberty. Is that operating in a fair and equal manner? And are we doing everything we can? Because that's the kind of world we want to leave for our children, not just one that's safe, but also one that is just.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, my pleasure. Thank you.